Janab Sahab, Hamid Waha Sahab, Abdul Shaban Sahab, and other important members who have played a great key role in bringing out the Sudhir committee. And then all the contributors, Dr. Aftab Alam, Tanveer Alam, Imtiaz Ali Sahab, Dr. P. Aparna, Bibi Bhagat Sahab, Kavita Baral, Dr. K. Bala Subramaniam, and the rest. The list is very long, but I'm really indebted to all of them for bringing out this amazing book, Muslims in Telangana. And I hope that people at large who are interested in knowing the socio-economic health condition of Muslims of Telangana would really read it. And at the outset, I want to really thank the Honorable Minister of Telangana, Janab K. for agreeing to form this committee under the leadership of Janab Sahab. And he had always been very forthcoming to ideas which were given by the members. I had the great honor of being present in one meeting where Dr. Amirullah Khan, Dr. Shaban, and Sudhir Sahab was there. And whatever was said by Amirullah Sahab and Shaban Sahab was immediately accepted by the Chief Minister. Amir Bhai, can I know how much time I have? So based on that, I will speak.
You have 20 minutes, Asad Bhai.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I want to thank also Professor Dr. Who had played a very important role, Abu Saleh Sharif Sahab, in such a committee also. He was a member secretary. And it also needs to be pointed out that this book, Muslims in Telangana, I am of the opinion, I am not a scholar like all the honorable dignitaries out there, but the little political experience I have, I can say with all the responsibility that as far as in last 15 years, any empirical study that has been done on the Muslims, I think only 2 states have done such an empirical study. One is in Maharashtra. Again, over there, Abdul Shaban Sahab had played a very, very important role in bringing out that report. And now in Telangana, the Sudhir Committee report. So these are 2 important reports, but let me also be very, I might sound very biased, but this report, Shaban Sahab, is much better than your earlier report on Maharashtra, the Mahmood Rahman Committee report. I mean, this is too focused, and being a political student, I have to read this book at least 3 times, 2 to 3 times, to understand, what really is there. And I'm going to trouble a lot to Amir Bhai and Shaban Sahab in understanding so many issues. But thank you, Sudhir Sahab, for doing a tremendous work in bringing out the report. And I'm sure history will remember you, Amir Bhai, Shaban Sahab, Bari Sahab, for doing a fantastic job, sitting in that office in front of police control room. But a great work has come out. I'm sure with all the scholars, policy makers, and the governments would rely on this report. So let me start by saying that this book, it has avoided presenting Muslims as mere statistics. The other aspect that must be appreciated is that academic as well as cultural discussion around Indian Muslims are generally deemed to be important only if they are being talked about in cultural terms. In other words, Muslims are only relevant if we are discussing Hindu-Muslim or secular issues. I will need a whole day if I start recollecting the number of well-meaning upper caste Hindus who have come to me and recollected how in older days, that is before 2014, their Muslim friends used to invite them for Eid, and then they used to visit them for Diwali. I would rather, I've heard the authors. I have gained more from sitting over here in terms of knowledge. So my opinion is that this volume points to the increasingly new ways in which Muslims are being marginalized. This is in addition to the various deprivations they already face. Secondly, Muslims may be uneducated, suffer from lack of healthcare, they may have limited economic opportunities, but data points to how they want to improve. Very often, cultural explanations are used to dismiss Muslim concerns. For example, their lack of education will be blamed on them sending their children to madrasas. Their growing population will be blamed on their faith. But in reality, there is a socio-economic data that explains that it is their exclusion from mainstream development that has caused them this harm, not some unique cultural traits only found in them. Lastly, it is important to recognize that development of Muslims requires us to not forget the existential threat of Hindutva and its goals. But we should also not forget that is not the only issue affecting us. Now, in my opinion, that is why such scholarship is important, because it is a myth buster to the lies perpetrated by those in power, both Hindus and Muslims. While government leaders have tried to blame backwardness of Muslims as a community, many Muslim leaders have acted only as upper class leaders or only interested in symbolism. The elitism has resulted in projecting Muslims as former rulers and royalty, which in reality majority of Muslims belong to backward caste and have never had access to any meaningful power. This volume recognizes there is a double whammy that Indian Muslims face. They face social exclusion, but also physical threats to life and property during communal programs and police atrocities. In addition to this, they also face a bureaucracy that does not take their concerns seriously. This is why discussions about Muslims should not veer towards what can Muslims do. It assumes that the lack of development or backwardness of Muslims is a result of their lack of initiative. Muslim backwardness is not the result of culture. It is systemic and structural. Unless we address the widespread exclusion of Muslims from political and administrative decision making, we cannot repair how much damage the community has faced. The second more interconnected fact that is also brought out by this volume is the castification of Muslims in India. Hindutva has sought to recast a diverse and unique community into a single mold. The treatment meted out to them in the form of lynching, social boycott, accusation of corona, land, comedy jihad is only aimed at separating Muslims from the rest of the country and to ensure that we know our place. With social media, you see a new trend used for Muslims, Pancharwala, which is used to insult Muslims. First, only in a caste-ridden society can an occupation associated with hard work and skill be used as an insult. Secondly, the effort is to relegate Muslims to only menial or lowly jobs. Therefore, if you see them as scientists, doctors, politicians, journalists, which includes all the esteemed panel who are here, they must be beaten and taught their place in society. Let us not forget that the Prime Minister himself contributed to this stereotype. In June 2014, he said, "When I was young, a Muslim man used to repair my cycle. Today's son is doing the same job." Why is this? Need to focus on their development. The implication is that somehow Muslims don't want to develop, and that is why we are stuck in the same place. However, studies point out that lack of government support has meant that Muslims are not only stagnant, but their status has worsened. For example, data shows Muslims and OBCs have economic parity, but OBCs have higher education attainments thanks to reservations since the 1950s. Intergenerational mobility, the opportunity for a boy to do better in life than his father, has improved for SCs and STs, but fallen for Muslims. Economics from Dartmouth and MIT found that expected educational rank of a Muslim child has fallen substantially over the last 20 years, and intergenerational mobility is now considerably worse among Muslims than SCs and STs. This volume shows this castification is not the only thing happening. This vocal marginalization of Muslims is accompanied by steamrolling our diversity and internal stratification. It is true that a large chunk of Muslims across India are equivalent of backward class and scheduled caste tribes. This stereotyping is also meant to create a monolithic Muslim identity. This is more convenient than engaging with a community that is different in different parts of India, and even different in the same states. Lastly, I want to say that well-meaning Hindus often say that Muslims must focus on education and ignore politics. I want to say that communal pogroms, violence has repeatedly targeted Muslims attempt to educate or economically empower themselves. Since the time of my father, late Sultan Salahuddin Owaisi, the first target of violence was always Muslims' economic power. Let me give a recent example. In Muzaffarnagar 2013, there was a common saying that Muslims have gone from being a Kasai to Arabpati. Even the bogie of love jihad is based on signs of Muslims' economic progress. Hindus are warned that Muslim boys with bikes and Googles are coming after them. We have seen this again in Northeast Delhi in another program which happened in capital of our country. Mohsin Sheikh killing a software engineer who, clearing his interview for Wipro. The mob killed him, only saw that he was a Muslim. Now, another point, because of paucity of time, let me make it very brief. The other way this volume brings out this picture is in the data of pertaining to education, healthcare, and employment. Muslims fall behind on each of these indicators in Telangana, but also other states. This data shows they struggle to do better despite limited government support. For example, this volume shows that while Muslims are only 14%, but they are 28% of India's immigrant going outside the country. The volume shows that immigration plays an important role in the progress of households and communities and improves the quality of life. It has a crucial role for the marginal and minority communities who face serious barriers and discrimination, not only in accessing labor market, but also healthcare. This is a sign that Muslims struggle to find economic opportunity here, and they are willing to leave their homes and struggle in difficult conditions only to improve their economic status. Similarly, NSO data shows that Muslim school enrollment is quite high. In Telangana too, Muslims have a higher percentage of literates than Hindus, but their educational attainment starts falling. This is an important point because you have the Hindutva guys who will start using this data. Their educational attainment starts falling, especially after secondary school. This points to the absence of government schools and their ability to afford private schools. But it also points to the struggle and initiative that Muslims have taken to improve their own lot. It shows their willingness to educate their children. Similarly, this volume brings out another important facet: population growth. As per 2011 census, the Muslim population in Telangana is 44.83 lakhs, which as per the authors is expected to grow in the range of 53 to 56 lakhs by 2026. Again, this is an important point which I'm sure all the right-wing Hindutva so-called ideologues would read if they have time and if their mental mindset permits them to accept this fact. It is observed that contrary to the popular impression, the rate of growth of Muslim population is not much different from the state average. The authors affirm that the median age among Muslims in Telangana and the rest of the country is considerably lower than the state and national average respectively. Another important point this volume brings out about the maternal and child health indicators show that Muslim minorities are on par with urban average in the state in accessing various health services. Muslim women avail best postnatal care than SCs and other religious groups. Higher utilization of 6 types of ANC tests by pregnant women of the Muslim community, and the higher child immunization, which was preferred from the government sector among the community, indicates better health-seeking behavior of Muslims. In other words, where government service is available, Muslims go out of the way to avail them. The author observed that in Telangana, the nutrition status of children based on anthropometric measures is better for Muslims in comparison to other social religious communities. However, childhood nutritional advantages are not passing to adult age health condition of Muslims. In other words, parents are striving to ensure better nutrition for children, but as Muslims grow older, these advantages disappear, perhaps pointing to general poverty and inability to consume nutritious food, which was also pointed out by a panelist who contributed to this magnificent book. Now, identifying challenges for Muslims in Telangana. This is again based on brief reading of this magnificent book. That Muslims have the largest population in the age group of less than 15 years. Therefore, if we want a better future, we need to feed them well, provide them well with better health care, and improve access to education. It is not enough that we have a few schemes here and there. There should be a special provision to ensure that Muslims are not excluded from general benefit. For example, it is true that minority residential schools in Telangana have helped many Muslim kids. You have 60,000 Muslim boys and girls studying in these residential schools. But it is also one aspect. The general focus on improving government schools in Muslim areas should not be ignored. Similarly, we should support scholarship schemes focused on minorities, but we should not ignore the need for more schools, more colleges in general that ensure that Muslim children have adequate opportunities to educate themselves. Therefore, my party focus has been not only to ensure that there's affirmative action for reservation, but also that Muslims are able to better avail mainstream benefits of the government as well. The share of Muslims in the poorest 20% of Telangana is on the rise, indicating high risk of poverty for Muslim groups. The volume also examines the social economic situation of Muslims vis-a-vis other communities based on data from other large-scale sample survey. The key findings emerging out of an analysis of survey data are: Muslims are more backward than the Hindu counterparts in education. Muslims face problem in accessing bank credit. The need to contribute to household income and marriage are the main reasons for both Muslims, Hindu and Muslim household not sending their children to school. D, a lower percentage of Muslim households have Pakka houses compared to the Hindu counterparts. E, livelihood and economic condition indicate that a little more than 1/4 of Muslim households were engaged in casual labor in non-agricultural sectors, followed by self-employment in these sectors. About Muslim women, I take from what an expert has said in this discussion. This volume has brought out their plight, and we need to take responsibility to do better. In rural Telangana, 49% of households for Muslim OBCs had no female literate. The mean years of schooling of girls among Muslim OBCs is lower than those among STs and Hindu OBCs. It is noticed that Muslim women in the reproductive ages are also being bearing the burden of malnutrition. In urban areas, it is observed that the attainment of Muslims at different levels of education is lower than of SC, especially for boys. Unemployment rate, according to current daily status, is very high. 45% among Muslims in the age group of 2024. Work participation rates are lower in Muslim concentration districts as Nizamabad, Rangareddy, Medak, Adilabad, Mahbubnagar, and Hyderabad. High percentage of Muslims are in informal sector in both rural and urban areas. Crafts, related trade, service and sales, plant, machine operators are important activities, wherein 75% which Muslims are there. Muslim workers are disadvantaged in availing benefits like social security, paid leave, and regular payments. Again, this points to urgent need for government to create policies that encourage and support Muslims in the formal labor sector. As far as IAS, IPS, IFS is concerned, it is very low. And I think so, according to my memory, it's nearly 3%, which again needs to be improved. Because that is very important area where Muslims must have their representation. And now the study on Muslims' access to banking credit facilities has used both qualitative and quantitative information from various sources. The major findings are that Muslims have less access to banking credit facilities compared to Hindus and other social religious groups, and Muslims borrowing is more. This is a very important point. Muslim borrowing is more for consumption purpose than for productive investment. The chapter suggests a comprehensive credit policy for Muslims in Telangana. We must see how better the Telangana Minority Finance Corporation can be used to prove financial inclusion and credit finance that is for productive activity. My concluding remarks, Amir Bhai, I can see that you're worried about the time. I'll take another 3 minutes if you permit me, Amir Bhai.
No, go ahead. You are well within the time.
So, in concluding remarks, this volume brings out the need to look beyond this reservation. Just like Sudhir Committee report, this volume also makes clear that Muslims deserve access to mainstream government services, as well as other forms of affirmative action that goes beyond just reservation. This is not to minimize the importance of reservation, but it is also one part of a larger strategy. On every index of backwardness and deprivations, Muslims are at the top. Having gone through parts of the book, the distinct feeling I was left with is the same feeling that I had when I had toured Simanchal or those areas of lower Assam, West Bengal, Malda, Murshidabad, where other groups are struggling to get ahead and improve their lot. Muslims are running to stay in the same place. That is the apt description I can make. The struggle is to somehow not see the situation worsen, but data is clearly pointing out that Muslim backwardness is only increasing. In the absence of course correction, it will worsen further. This is why it may be important. Amir Bhai, Sudhir Saab, and Shaban Saab, this is for you. This is my earnest request to you. This is why it may be important to do a follow-up report to the Sudhir committee, to see if the schemes and government policies have helped improve Muslim development indices. The introductory chapter makes a point: the psyche of a large number of Muslims thus rests on the assumption and belief that there is nothing going for them. It is a hopeless situation in which they are stuck and see no sign of any respite. I do not see any hopelessness in Muslims in Telangana or otherwise. I see anxiety and fear, but not hopelessness. There is a general acknowledgement situation being bad, but there's an immense resilience and urge to do better, to find a way to become full citizens of India, especially among young Muslims. There is no apologia. They are not embarrassed and do not see themselves as victims, but as survivors. I am grateful that this book has striven to break away from romanticizing Muslims or creating an undimensional picture. Very often, such volumes about Muslims tend to blame Muslims as well, clergy, religion, cultural practice. Instead, this volume has tried to identify the many facets of Muslim backwardness. However, my only complaint and hope is that one day I hope to see a book written by my elder brother Amirullah Khan and my very, very dear friend Dr. Abu Shaban, that one day I hope to see a volume about Indian Muslims that has no reference to partition at all. The partition is history. We cannot forever be bound by it. With what this volume points out for me is the need to break away from concepts such as unity and religious harmony and to discuss social justice. The former always requires us, you talk about religious harmony, it requires us to go back to partition. The latter, that social justice, requires us to think of the future and the right given to us by the Constitution. And may I also point out to Sudhir Sahab, Shaban Sahab, Bari Sahab, and Amir Sahab, that on page 112 of this book, these are my definitely concluding remarks. On page 112, on page 117, Bholakpur, you will be happy to know that I had used the Sudhir committee report. I had gone to K.T. Ramarao with this report and showed him in 2018, before 2018 civil elections, that, sir, this is the Sudhir committee report, which talks about how in Bholakpur, how the living conditions of Muslims are. And I'm very thankful to KTR that immediately he had sanctioned a sewerage line and a water line. A water line, the cost of water line was nearly 12.5 crores. Sewerage line also was nearly 12 crores. So Alhamdulillah, the sewerage line has been laid in Bholakpur, thanks to Sudhir Saab, Shaban Saab, Amir Bhai, Bari Saab, and now the water line is near completion. So I would request you that you should visit Bholakpur with Yamin, who's out there. So be rest assured that we are using this. We'll be using this book. We'll be using and the Sudhir report to make to give hateful and inciting speeches on behalf of me. And if any cases are booked on me under 153A, I would request the police to also book Sudhir Saab, Amir Saab, because and Bari Saab, because what makes what really hurts me, what makes me give those speeches is this data. This makes me, it doesn't makes me angry, but it makes me ask question, how, why is it that we are in such a state? Why is it that when all these loud and proud claims are made, but be rest assured that my party and myself, we'll be using this data, we'll be putting it forward to the Telangana government, and I'm sure that the government headed by KCR would definitely listen to your recommendations. And as a political party, it is our responsibility as well to keep talking about it, to keep demanding it from the government. And I'm sure that inshallah, we'll be able to do more constructive, substantive work in Telangana for the Muslims, based on the great hard work done by all the scholars, Sudhir Saab, Bari Saab, Amirullah Bhai, Abdul Shaban. But I may request you that please we require a follow-up report on this. Either, I don't know whether the government will agree to it, but I'm sure that Amir Bhai, and I'm willing to cooperate and help, and we should not leave Shaban Saab also. Mashallah, is more younger after losing some weight, Shaban Saab, after a very long time. And thank you, Amir Bhai, thank you, Shaban Saab, thank you, Sudhir Saab. And I hope that this book would be kept in every university library, especially those places who are doing courses on social sciences, social studies. And I for definitely would be writing a letter to the Parliament Library to buy this book and to keep it in India's Parliament, though it is very expensive, but it is expensive because of the hard work that has been gone into it. And let me end my speech by hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where this hadith is taught to Islamic students in a madrasa who learn fiqh. And the hadith in the hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, people die, but your work will not die. People, the work which you have done, whether it's Imam Azam, Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, because these people are not there, but their works they are still alive in the form of work they have done. And I'm sure that all of us are going to disappear one day, but I'm sure that people of Telangana, Muslims of Telangana and Muslims of India will really remember this great work done by Amarullah Khan, Shaban Saab. This is Sawab-e Jariyah for you. And I make dua for all of you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you safe and make you work more. We require more such data, because then only this focus would change. The political discourse will change from this every election. The focus is security. You will die. The focus, the focus should be on this data. This is where you expose the governments. You tell us based on this data what have you done, and then you deserve our vote. But anyway, I'm becoming more giving a political speech. Thank you, Amir Bhai. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Asad Bhai. Thank you very much.